It's hard to say this is a good day. It's a hard day. And I feel so bad that it's been delayed for you as a family. But that's good that everybody is well and healthy now. I'd like to begin by reading Psalm 23, which is something that Mom and Grandma and Great-Grandma wanted to hear. David wrote, "The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows, and he leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along the right path, bringing honor to his name. And even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect me, and it comforts me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of mine enemies, and you honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever." And I think the only way that could have been maybe added to is if David said, "And we all have a good laugh when we're together." And that's something that's comforting today, because that gift that has been instilled in you by Mom and Grandma and Great-Grandma and from your grandpa, that gift of laughing together as a family. And I think laughter comes from a place of joy, and joy comes from a place of love. And there was nobody like Shirley that made you feel loved and cared for like that lady. So friends, I'd like to ask you to join me in a prayer of thanks for her life. Lord, you give us many gifts. And we thank you for a wonderful lady who was first a gift to her mom and dad, and then her brothers. A gift to her husband. A gift to her children and her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren. A gift, Lord, to her friends and her neighbors. A lady who welcomed you in with love and laughter and made you feel safe and cared for in her presence. Lord, we thank you for this gift that has been so present in such tangible and real ways. A lady who invited you in and always made sure that there was something special just for you. A lady who was always quick to turn on the kettle and just sit down for a good yap. And always there was laughter and care and tenderness. So Lord, as we remember her today, comfort our hearts. Thank you for this gift of a wonderful mom, a wonderful grandma, great-grandma, and wife. And Lord, thank you so much for her life. Amen. I just want to give a little time, if anybody would like to share a memory about mom or grandma or great-grandma. We have some letters that I'm going to read, but maybe there's something you'd like to share. Anita, your brother, thought maybe it'd be nice if you could go first, and then he will happily throw you under the bus, and then come up afterwards.
I like this man.
Wait till he reads mine.
Mom talked a lot about her childhood in her later years. A lot of it, I think it was because we would go to visit her grandchildren in Grimsby, and Grimsby is where she was raised. She talked a lot about her church there, St. John's Presbyterian, which her father, Charles, had helped to build. She was very proud of it, and she talked about how they had hauled stone down from the mountain, from a quarry, to help build it. And when they realized they had more than they had for the initial church, they decided to bury the stones. So when they did expand the church, they were able to match it perfectly because they just dug the stones up.
Oh, that's great.
She thought that was practicality in Grimsby style. She was very proud where she was born. She was born a Mason. Charles Mason and his wife Annie Mason were her parents. Annie was the first member of the family to be born in Canada. She was born in Smithville. Mom always liked to tell the story that when she was just a small baby, there was a terrible flu that went around in Ontario, and Annie caught it. And so many people had died, they didn't think Annie would live. And then while she was sick, there was a knock on the door, and an older Aboriginal woman was at the door. My great-grandmother and a great-great-great-grandmother to to the youngest here, went to the door, and the Aboriginal woman said, "Are you the lady with the sick baby?" And she said yes, and she handed her a bag and said, "Here's some herbs and plants. Boil it into a tea and give it to the baby, and that will make her better." And since we're here now, it worked. And my mother was always very proud that she thought perhaps we had a guardian angel for the firstborn in Canada who was Aboriginal. But I think she also was happy to know that even then neighbors helped one another. The doctor, she liked to think it was a guardian angel, was the doctor went looking for the woman because the tea had been so successful. He wanted to give it to other patients, and they were never able to track her down. They don't know who she was, but she was a blessing that came to our family when they first came to Canada. Mom would talk about how the police chief's wife used to come to their house or her grandmother's house on Saturday nights because the police chief was always worried that the rowdies would come bother her. So she came into the Robertson family and the Mason family to be protected, and they played cards. And my mother said she wasn't very good, and she was also very critical. And she said she bore most of because she was the youngest and she was invited to play sometimes, she bore most of the criticism. But he also, if the police chief had trouble in town, if there were drunk or rowdies, he always said, "Go get Charles Mason." He could talk reason into any local man. And he was very well respected in his town. Everybody knew him, and he had won the military medal in the First World War for his work on the battlefield carrying the wounded off the field after a gas attack. And he worked for 24 hours straight in mask, bringing people out. So when letters would come and they would say MM, he would always tell my mother it meant mischievous monkey. he enjoyed a laugh. My grandmother was also well respected in town, and Annie often went out to nurse when people were sick. And my mother said, strangely, everybody in the neighborhood always knew when Annie wasn't there. And I asked why, and she said, well, there was one occasion when Annie would go out, she would always leave a pot of porridge on the stove so that breakfast was ready for the kids, because she usually had to leave before they got up. And my Uncle Bob, who was the oldest, decided one day that everyone had to have sugar on their porridge, and he was master of the sugar bowl. So she said she grabbed her porridge and ran out the door, and her brother chased her up the street, throwing sugar at her. And one neighbor looked out and said, "Your mother's nursing again, isn't she?" My mother also had a younger brother, Bruce. Bruce didn't talk until he was 4, and that worried everybody. But my father always said he never got a chance to talk because of Bob and my mother. They never were quiet long enough. She talked a lot about how she had to take care of him, drag him around everywhere, and she was utterly mortified because when the militia gathered at Niagara-on-the-Lake, her father would go because he was with them, and she would have to sit outside the tent with all the little children, including her little brother, because she wasn't old enough to go in because you could buy booze, and she wasn't 21. So she always regretted the fact that she had to sit outside with him. But she liked him. He was a nice man. She met my father at this local skating rink, and they courted and they married. He was known as a rink rat because boys would stand outside and agree to come in and shovel the ice off at halftime in recreational skating, and they got in free that way. So she married the local rink rat, she said. They always laughed a lot. They were a very happy family. We were a very happy family. They never went anywhere without us. The children always went with them. And my father wouldn't have heard of anything different. And my mother agreed with him. My mother agreed with him a lot. He ruled the house. speaking of laughing a lot, my father would always tell the time that in the old days cars had a crank to start them, and he had a troublesome car, so he got my mother to sit inside and start the ignition, and he was working on the car to get it cranked up to go, and she drove over his foot. And she looked up and saw the pained look on his face and was so afraid she had stomped on his foot that she backed up and rode over it a second time. But the marriage lasted. She was also known for sending me to sit on the porch with a dime to wait for the yummy man to come. That's about 4 o'clock. She said it kept you quiet for an hour and a half, which was especially brutal because the yummy man only came every other day, and I wasn't bright enough to know that. And of course, when I came back in and said he hadn't come, she said, "Well, give me the dime. We'll be ready tomorrow when he comes." One of the neighbors, Mrs. Olga Harichko, who was very critical of us, said, "How can you do that to your poor little girl?" And about a year later, she had a daughter, and soon after that, she said, "Now I understand about the dime." Mom was great. She made all my school clothes, including my centennial dress for the 1967 big celebration. She also made all sorts of Barbie clothes, wedding gowns, evening gowns, turtleneck sweaters, hats, everything under the sun. She was also a bargain hunter. At her old age, the blue bag was the highlight of the week, so she could check out whatever was on sale. And she was always reminding me that Peter was such a good shopper and such a good bargain hunter. And how had it skipped her daughter? But that also worked with the fact that my grandmother, Auntie Mason, couldn't cook. And my mother could cook like a dream. She would bake cakes and cookies and pies and everything wonderful. And I don't. I make reservations. My father, the reason for all the desserts was my father. He liked them and he pleased her. She would talk about going to her aunt's house in Grimsby, who ran a bit of a boarding house and would serve meals to a number of people who boarded locally. And my mother would love to go and stick around to get invited for dinner, although she wasn't supposed to, because they always had Jell-O for dessert. And she loved Jell-O. We very rarely had Jell-O because my dad didn't like it. And we said, "Thank you, Dad." She enjoyed cooking. She enjoyed Mary's turkey dinners and all the baking Mary did at Christmas and holidays. That was wonderful, and it still is. And we're ready to come anytime. She loved her granddaughters. She attended school concerts and organ recitals, and she loved to cook special cookies and things when they came. It was very important to her. She was pleased with their accomplishments. Their graduation pictures still hang proudly on her wall. Education was very important to her because when she was old enough to go, Teachers College was free, but her family couldn't afford the bus fare, so she was never able to go. She went to work at a bank, and you can attest how good a banker she was, because I've been going through the books that show how much she paid for hydro, mortgage, whatever, through her entire marriage, even up to the present. I thought she'd stopped keeping them about 20 years ago, but no, she hadn't. I was looking for the will. I could never find it, but I found what she paid for hydro in 1985. And in 1950. She loved her great-grandchildren as well. Julia, when she was a baby and a young child, loved soft and furry things, and she would wander around the house with Grandma's Angora cat. It was a stuffed toy, but She was so pleased that Julia loved it because she thought it was a wonderful toy. She loved Mason. She was especially touched how much he loved Grandpa and took a shine to him. I remember when Mason a while ago found folded sunglasses in the basement and proudly brought them up. He was going to take them home and show his dad. His dad didn't have anything like that. They folded up into this small little thing. And she was so pleased that he had found something he liked. She was pleased that Jessie loved school and art and laughed hysterically when she found out Jessie had told her mother, "What do you mean you're going to throw out some of my art pieces?" and Susan asked, "Where do you buy something large enough to keep a lifetime of artwork in?" I don't know what Susan has done to resolve that, but I think they're getting a third garage. She was so pleased that Jordan enjoyed school too. School was very important to Grandma. She was proud of her grandsons-in-law as well. It touched her deeply when Cobb bragged about his wife's honors when she graduated from college and had studied while she was working. He also was pleased with all the home renovations and home repairs he was able to do, and just regretted he didn't come over more to do them in her house. She loved Dan very much too, as he's home looking after the youngest great-grandchildren right now, and she enjoyed how much he loved being with his children and how comfortable they were with him and how he was easy doing chores and changing their diapers and helping to feed them and whatever. It pleased her greatly. Especially she was impressed that he knew the name of all their toys, even the dolls. Anyway, Grandma loved her family very much. They were the most important thing in her life, and she would be sad that she couldn't be here and that we can't have more friends and family with us, but she knows we're together and that we're happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Wonderful. Thank you, Peter.
Really like that. I mean, I can keep mine really short now. I was trying to think of something from way back when. I was trying to put together where Mom and Dad might have met. I never did have a clear answer to that. And then I realized with Dad talking at times, he worked at the arena up here. He was a rink rat when he was a teenager. And back then, rink rats were at most of the places. There was no Zambonis. So between skating periods or right after hockey games, the rink rats would come out with their shovels and brooms, and they would scrape all the ice. If they found cracks or a hole in the ice, they would put a little bit of the scrapings they had with a little bit of water, tamp it down, and then the rink would be allowed to freeze. And then they actually brought out what looked like a black, rigid fire hose, and the water came out of that quite slowly. And they would let it sit for 10-15 minutes in the same spot, then move it again. This was Dad's job, and it gave him a little pin money to go see Mom. And this is where he met Mom. It was an open skate, and he saw her there, and this is what I gathered from him. But I didn't know whether he had seen her before, but seeing her come, I guess, to the rink, really caught his attention. and they became inseparable. I can tell you just how inseparable. Dad joined the Air Force. It was during the war. And he went to Montreal to do his basic training. After the basic training was finished, he was given a 5-day pass where he had to go back to Montreal, where he would be going to England to be stationed. And so what it was a Saturday. It was basically Christmas Eve, and it was wartime. And there was no trains, there was no buses. So he put on the clothes he had a small bag, and started walking. He hitchhiked his way from Montreal. The last ride he got was at just outside of Hamilton. So he was hiking down the highway, walking along. Probably about a mile and a half out of Hamilton, a car pulls up, and it's the Grimsby Sheriff. Him and Dad had a couple of run-ins because my grandfather, if he went to the pub there, would have Dad drive home, and he was only 14. The sheriff had something to say, and my grandfather said, "Do you expect me to drive after I've had some beer?" You know? And so it became quiet after that, because he saw Dad was, for 14 years old, was an excellent driver. It was all standards back then and everything. So he picked Dad up, and because he was half frozen, walking the highway this side of Hamilton, you know, and he dropped him off at home. The first thing he did was borrow the car, went to see Mom. That was his biggest thing in life at that time, you know. And when they were married, the war had just ended. Dad had come back. He had been a gunner on bombers. Did his tour there. Missed 2 flights. Once he was on some minor charges, got a week of hard labor. The second time he had an ear infection. The aircraft he was to fly on disappeared. There was never a sign of the crew or the aircraft. They figured one was seen under fire, and they believe it went into the marshes of Holland. The other one went into the channel. So, him and Mom both had their ups and downs, you know, but they had a wonderful, wonderful marriage. And that tenacity of his, of walking from Montreal and getting rides here and there, and then walking here and getting picked up by the sheriff, who had a little business in Hamilton, saw him, recognized him, and brought him home. It really shows the true love the two of them had, the sacrifices they were willing to make. And I only hope we can replicate ourselves with our own loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I don't want to put any pressure, but would anybody else like to? Okay. I have the great privilege of reading some letters and some thoughts. First is from Anita. Mom adored her 2 grandchildren, Donna and Susan. Wonderful memories of sleighing in the backyard of their home in the winter. And in the summertime, Grandma and Grandpa would lay down that plastic sheeting covered with soap bubbles and water so they could slide down the hill. Grandma was so proud of the 2 of you. Loved to attend any of your concerts, just listening to your adventures when you came over to her home, enjoying tea and her homemade baking. She was so proud of your scholastic achievements. She was so impressed, Susan, with how hard you worked in your job and your ability to do what you do in human resources and graduating from university when it was almost impossible for young graduates to find work, and you did. And how proud she was of you, Donna, when you graduated with honors, and knowing how hard you had to study and raising 2 children. It made her so happy to see Kyle, Donna's husband, proudly point out the diploma in their wall that his wife got with her honors. She loved watching Donna and Kyle raise their 2 children, Julia and Mason. And it was the same for Susan and Dan, with their 2 girls, Jessie and Jordan. She always noted with pleasure that the men were always involved in the care of the children. She was so proud and so joyful to watch the little ones raised with such love and such care. She was proud and impressed when Dan would assist her with her electronics and how easily he could set up her TV and cable, because it was all a mystery to her.
Yeah.
Mom was always happy to hear and watch the great grandchildren. Activities and achievements, watching with her heart in her throat as Julia would climb up the ropes at gymnastics, and the exceptional speed and skill she had, and no fear. Her sewing projects. Watching Mason at karate with his wonderful moves and the belts he won. Seeing Mason climb into his great-grandpa's lap for a cuddle when he came over for a visit. Watching how much Jessie loved to draw and smile, and how Jessie could get very upset if her mother would even think of throwing any of her artwork at me. Jessie's love of school and her boldness in defending her interests. She was so pleased that Jordan loved kindergarten and was doing so well. She loved telling people how Jordan would watch the rabbits in her backyard. She loved the girls and Mason's artwork, and like their mother's artwork, posted it regularly on a refrigerator to show the world. Mom loved to show photos of her family and her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren to friends and family who visit. She left such a wonderful impression on your lives. This next letter is from Dawn. Dear Grandma, I'm having a hard time accepting that you're gone. Being unable to talk to you any time, night or day, is very foreign to me. I'm sure it's going to be a long while until I get used to that fact. Growing up, you were my go-to to share my news and my thoughts. Especially in my early 20s, you were the one that was most pivotal with the people in my life. You were the first phone call when I finally became a full-time employee at my first job. I came to you and Grandpa when Kyle and I decided to buy our first home before we were married. I remember crying at your table thinking you would be disappointed in me, and you couldn't have been more supportive. I called you in times of happiness, sadness, frustration, and all emotions in between. You always lent an ear and listened, and always managed to make me smile and laugh and feel comforted. I sure could use one of those talks right now. I'm not sure how I would have managed through those years without you, or how I'm going to manage the ones ahead of me without you. My only solace is that you are with Grandpa now, and that brings me some peace. Thank you for being a wonderful grandma and great grandma. I love you. Bye for now, Dawn. This next letter is from Susan. Dear Grandma, I'm not sure how to begin. I feel like you could have helped me to get started. I'm sitting here with my tea trying to find comfort in it, because I know if we were together right now, you would be telling me not to worry while you made your way to the kitchen to plug in the kettle. I want you to know that I'm grateful for every tea and dessert we shared. I'm grateful for all the ways in which you have positively influenced my family over the years. I'm grateful for the lessons we learned from you, some big and some small, and all of which will live on forever within our family. As a child, my heart is warmed by the memories I have of spending time with you. You and Grandpa and Donna at your home while Mom and Dad worked around the clock. Regardless of the circumstance of the day or the time we arrived, you always made us feel welcome and right at home. You would share your love by calling us your sweeties and always ensured we had some fun and laughter together. I remember all the activities you would organize for us. I learned to knit, dressing up in your jewelry and makeup, sometimes with and sometimes without your permission. Sledding down the back hill on our sleds in the winter and our homemade versions of slip and slides in the summer. Reading our favorite books again and again. Playing cards. Or pulling us around and around on that carpeted trolley that Grandpa built to take the garbage out. Grandma, you always went out of your way to make sure that we were having fun. And when that didn't work, you comforted us with sugar and a little drop of tea. And that most delicious peanut butter sandwiches that we shared while you reminisced about funny family stories. It never failed to help. As a great grandma, you did the same for your grandkids. I remember many times telling you, and you telling me not to worry as Jessie walked around with the china basket from your coffee table, swinging it back and forth like a purse. Or as Jessie and Jordan aggressively twisted back the back of your music boxes to make them play again. What was yours was ours. And if they were smiling, you were smiling even bigger. Every visit, you would disappear twice. Once to plug in the kettle and pull out any sweets you had in the freezer. And the second to go to the back room in search of toys and crafts for your grandkids to play with. I know when all of your great-grandkids think of great-grandma for years to come, their hearts will be warmed with similar memories of feeling right at home, having laughs and indulging in treats that you shared with them. When you weren't orchestrating an activity for us to have fun and laughter, you were the first to make light of a hard situation and find a reason to giggle. One of the stories that Dan shared recently was the time he dropped you and Grandpa off at home. Grandpa had dropped the cake all the way down his leg and onto his shoe. Dan didn't know how to respond. He looked down at his feet until you broke the silence with uncontrollable laughter. Dan will never forget how hard you laughed that day. He remembers you crying and trying to catch your breath to help. Dan and Grandpa couldn't help but follow along and laugh too. I think you cried out of laughter many times retelling that story to us. And although my heart is warmed with so many memories of time together with you, one highlight for me as a mom is the day we went shopping together at Costco, while Jessie was just a little baby in my arms. I remember us getting back to the car after what seemed like the longest trek and having Jessie begin to fuss and cry her eyes out from her car seat. I remember leaning over to you and said, "Grandma, she isn't going to stop until we sing." And you responded without a pause to say, "Which song are we going to sing?" And together we sang "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" again and again, almost the entire way home to your house until she fell asleep. It was just one more way you showed me your love. Grandma, you lived through a lot of happy and challenging times, and I know this past year was particularly hard for you. I will always cherish time with you. I will always be inspired by your strength and your resilience and the way in which you went about your day. Living independently at 95 years old, you are an incredible woman. I will always be inspired by your love for Aunt Anita, Dad, and your family. Your love for good company, a celebration, a good piece of dark chocolate, a sarcastic joke, and a life filled with laughter. We hope you are smiling down on us today and always in the good company of Grandpa. We love you forever. Ladies, thank you. I feel like all the pressure is off me now. I can't imagine what it was like for your mom being born and grandma and great-grandma being born in 1925. The First Great War had just ended, and then the Great Depression started. And then World War II broke out. And growing up in Grimsby with two brothers, there was a lot of joy and laughter in the house because Mom learned to laugh from her dad, who was a hoot. And he was a man who was heavily involved in World War I and knew the horror of war, as Anita has shared. And on that day at Passchendaele, almost 500,000 lives were lost. And to work steady 24 hours a day, hauling the wounded to safely, leaves an impression. And he could have very easily become embittered with the horror that humanity can do with others. Or he could choose to be different. And he chose to be different. And occasionally people would come by and visit him. And one gentleman came by and Dad looked at him and said, "I thought you were dead." And they got it. Mom was a good student, an active student. And when she went into high school, she was a good student until she met John. And I can't imagine what that was like when your daughter is such a lovely girl, doing well academically, and then she's hanging around with this rink rat. And she did what she could to help financially. She got a job as a cigarette girl where she had a nice little uniform and she would go door to door trying to sell cigarettes, trying to help. Dad had a challenging time, and when they fell in love, they planned a life together. And then the war broke out. Everything changes. And you worry, there's those absences. There's that wonderful trip Dad made back from Montreal. And then he's overseas, and you worry. And there's such gaps sometimes between the information that happens. And then the war ended. And I can't imagine the celebration in May in 1945 when they got married. It happened in a home in their backyard with flowers everywhere because both parents love flowers. And they dreamed about the home and the family they would raise. It wasn't always easy, but they made do with what they had. Dad had an opportunity out west. They traveled out to Alberta. Dad built homes for a couple of years, and that changed. And while they were out there, Mom had that incredible ability to make friends with people. I can't imagine what it was like when this family moves in. And you hear all this ruckusing, laughter, and say, "What's going on with those people?" And then you're invited over, and you get it. And what a gift to have a wife who can make your home feel so like home, with laughter and love and joy. And when the work dried up in Alberta, they came back here. Dad eventually built their house just here in Stony Creek. And again, Mom is doing her thing. She's making friends. She's making acquaintances. She's playing cards and euchre, and everybody's having a great time. And she had the most wonderful snacks, and there was all that laughter. Anita remembers time growing up when you'd go to Grimsby and have fun at the beach, and how birthdays would be the most wonderful days as Mom would make these incredible cakes and throw these great parties. And at one party, every child was given a little candle, a marshmallow, and a lifesaver. And one little boy was absolutely broken because he thought he was going to have to kiss a girl, and he cried. And I can't imagine how fun Mom had at his expense. But she was a lady who could do anything with her hands. Made beautiful clothing and nice clothing. And Peter, I don't know if you remember the matching vest Mom made for you and your dad. And oh yeah, you just look so good together. And how Mom could turn any day into a great celebration. But the joy she had, turning your house into this wonderful place for Valentine's, for Easter, for Thanksgivings, for birthdays, for anniversaries, and Christmases. It felt like a party wherever she was around because she brought such joy, such laughter, such love. I don't even know where to begin with your Christmases. It was just a time where you felt cared for. And yes, it could be challenging at time at home financially, but Mom always made sure her children had a new coat, even if she didn't. She was that kind of lady. And when it came to raising her children, she wanted the best for them. She wanted them to do well academically, and she wanted them to look presentable and neat, and she cared about it. There was a rather funny day when Peter came home one day with a beautiful Irish setter named Dan, and he kept trying to tell his sister, "This is your new brother. This is your new brother." And she was having none of it. And there was that wonderful line, You may be his mother, but he is not my brother. And this is just joy you have. And Anita, I appreciate how much when you share about getting to know your mom as an adult. Mom allowed you that wonderful gift of saying, you're no longer just my little girl, you're now my friend. And when you got together with Mom, how she bragged about her family. How she was so proud of you, but so proud of Peter and his wonderful wife, Mary. And Mary, it must have been quite a treat being welcomed into that family and being loved and hearing that laughter and joy. And I'm not sure if you remember when Peter first got married and he was trying desperately to impress his wife, and he calls his mom. He says, Mom, how do you cook a flamingo? And Mom's like, where did you get a flamingo? He goes, Mom, a flamingo, the flamingo turkeys. Now, in fairness, Peter is an outstanding chef, and he does a wonderful job, but of course your sister had to share that. But there came a day for Grandma and Grandpa that everything changed. They were used to be called Mom and Dad, and then they found the news that they were going to be grandparents. And some people were just made to be grandparents. Your grandparents were those people. And watching Susan and Donna grow up and getting to spend so much time with them, you didn't have to spend very long with your grandparents to know how much they loved their grandkids. Whether it was sleepovers or fun memories, trip to Poland, the Oregon concerts, just being in the yard, there's these wonderful, wonderful memories. Being welcomed, Mary, as a young wife into the family and being loved and accepted, and she was so proud of you. And friends, as we have heard wonderful stories and memories, we could go on for hours. But what I'd like to do is talk about 3 incredible gifts that your mom, your grandma, and your great-grandma have given us. And the first to me is the gift of laughter and living life with others. To me, laughter is a gift that comes from joy, and joy is a gift that comes from love. And if you are loved, and your grandma was loved, she was loved so well by your grandpa, your mom was loved, you have this joy in you that spills over with laughter. And that laughter was contagious. It was something she had learned from her dad, who was a hoot. And she took that everywhere she went, whether it was part of her parties she'd have at the house or the card games, even if she wasn't very good and got a lot of grief for it. She laughed. And she had that wonderful ability to make other people laugh. I find that truly funny people see the humor in themselves first, and then see the humor in the world around them. It's not a mean kind of humor that gets a laugh out of tearing down somebody else, but it sees the simple things as funny. Your mom, your grandma, your great-grandma knew what that was. She knew how to laugh quickly because she knew what it was to go through the challenging times, which made everything else be in perspective. I appreciated that today there was such laughter in this room, because there's such joy and love when you think of this lady. I'd like to gently encourage you to continue to pass on this wonderful gift to others. When you grow up in this gift of laughter and joy, you think every family has that, until others come into it and they go, why are you so different? It must have been interesting for the neighbors who would hear all that ruckus and laughter going, what is going on with those people? And then they come in and they experience it. And you want more. So friends, continue to tell these stories. Continue to tell these memories. Continue to laugh even in the midst of your tears. The second gift is that ability Grandma and great-grandma had of creating safe places for people and learning and showing you how to roll with the changes in life. There's something uniquely special about people who could make us laugh and make friends quickly, and I mean real laughter and real friends. There is a lightheartedness to them that they seem to intuitively know what is important in life and what's not, and how to get to the heart of the matter. They seem to know how to encourage you on those tough days and cry with you on those sad days and inspire you on those days where you just feel like giving up, because they see something wonderful in you and they just help you see that too. And those people, to me, have the ability to make us feel safe. Whether it's sitting in her little kitchen nook with a cup of tea, or her just visiting your home, and that love, that joy, that safety just comes around. They make you feel cared for. They make you feel listened to. And they make you feel like you are right in their presence, and you are the most important person in their world at that time. I can't imagine what it would have been like for maybe another young mom who comes into her home struggling with what to do with her kids and her husband and the financial situation. And she has this ability to just calm you down. Gives you permission to share what's going on. And then gives you that wonderful advice that there's a bigger picture. She passed that on to her children, to her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren. That ability to let you know that she knows what it's like to go through a world war, to go through a depression, to see her husband and the love of her life go off to war and not sure what was going to happen, and then to see him coming back. She knows what it's like to go halfway across the country in a building boom, and then for that to dry up and have to come back home and redo it again. So she knew what was important, and she knew how to pass that on to you on what's important. She made you feel safe. She made you feel precious. Friends, may I gently encourage you to continue to pass that legacy on. Continue to tell those stories and live out how she did that. And the last gift I want to talk about is the one that's so evident today, the gift of loving your family. You didn't have to visit Shirley for very long to see on the walls of her house and out of her lips how proud she was of her family. Whether it was the pictures, the artwork, hearing her brag about Peter and Mary and Anita, her wonderful children, hearing her talk so proudly about her granddaughters and their husbands who were such good men, and then that great joy and delight she took in her great-grandchildren, Julia, Mason, Jesse, and Jordan. How she loved to hear their stories, how she loved to be involved in their lives. This is her living legacy. And I appreciate the eloquence, Peter, that you talked about Mom and Dad's love. And how they loved so much that a young man in a cold winter would make his way from Montreal to see the love of his life. Because that's what love compels you to do. You do everything for those you love. That's what Grandma did. That's what Mom did. That's what Great-Grandma did. Her family was her legacy that she loved. She laughed with. She cried with. She cheered you on. She was amazed by the gifts that you have. She's your biggest fan. And friends, for the last few weeks and for the rest of your life, you're going to have moments. You're going to have moments as a young mom going, I have the best mother-in-law in the world. You're going to have memories when you talk to friends about how great your mom was and how she loved you and encouraged you even on the days you're being jerks. You're going to have these wonderful memories of Grandma that just made life special, whether it was tobogganing or slipping sides in the backyard, going to your concerts, having tea, setting up her cable and her TV, going to your gymnastics and being so excited and so afraid for you, going to your karate, going to your school assemblies, proudly displaying your artwork everywhere. When you open a drawer and you find something she made for you, she sewed for you. Finding the artwork she kept because it was important, because you made it. Friends, these and a million more are going to hit you. Someone will call you sweet, and the tears to start coming. You'll be playing cards, you'll remember something she said. You'll make something that she gave you the recipe of. And friends, may I gently encourage you, embrace those memories. Embrace that moment. Don't push it away. Don't say, I don't want to fall apart here. Fall apart. Embrace it. Squeeze it. Hold it. And process it. And say, what is the gift of this memory? Is it her laughter? Is it her joy? Is it her ability to just cheer me on when I was ready to give up? Is it her that look of pride when she just looked at us And as you process the gift of that memory, say a quiet word of thanks. Then you know what? Tell each other. Call Dad, say, Dad, I remember the time when Grandma did this. Call Mom, say, Mom, I remember the time. Call Aunt Anita, say, Aunt Anita, I remember the time. Call Susan, call Donna, call Kyle, call Dan. Call the great-grandkids and say, I remember the day you were born, and this is what your great-grandma said. Will you make each other cry? Yeah. But you know what? You'll do what you did earlier. You'll laugh too. Because she brought that joy to you. So share those memories. Share those stories. Share the gift of those moments. You pass this beautiful legacy on. And you know what? You let each other know you care and you miss her. You let each other know she lives on in your present just as much as she did a month ago and 2 months ago. I appreciate that Grandma liked Psalm 23. And David wrote it. And probably from the time David was about Mason's age, he was stuck out in the fields looking after the family sheep. And Mason, I don't know how you'd feel if you got stuck out in the fields and everybody else is in the nice warm house, you know, with a bunch of stinky sheep. And my guess is one night David's sitting around a little campfire feeling pretty good about himself, that he's kept all his sheep safe, and he's kind of going like, I'm a pretty good shepherd. And he has this little epiphany. He said, you know, the way I look after my sheep, God looks after me. And he wrote this beautiful song. And the part that I really like is right in the middle. And David said, even though I walk through the darkest of valley, or the valley of the shadow of death, I don't have to be afraid. You are close beside me. And your rod and your staff protect me, and that brings me comfort. I sometimes get a little tired of the image of Jesus holding a sheep and everybody thinks he's this kind of softy. But David was a pretty tough dude. The shepherd's staff was typically a long stick with a hook, and that was used for pulling sheep out of a jam, whether they got caught in the water or caught in the brambles, they could pull it out. And when they would walk, they would often put the staff across the sheep's back, kind of like walking your arm around somebody. But the shepherd's rod is like a billy stick or a cruller or a club. And that had one purpose: to smash the skull of a predator. So at night, when it was dark, except for David's little fire, he would have his club, his rod in his hand. Because if the wild dogs, if the jackals came, he'd meet them. If the bears came or the lions came, he would meet them and he would deal with them. And sometimes, friends, we have to remind ourselves that the Lord watches over us by day and by night. Because sometimes in the long watches of the night, we can second guess ourselves. We can say, I wish we'd done this, I wish I'd done that. And this is where we need to experience what Grandma experienced, what Mom experienced. The Lord watching over her by day and by night. And he wasn't empty-handed. He can protect us from thoughts and feelings that would tear us down. You've had this wonderful lady as a gift who was your cheerleader, who was your protector, who was your biggest fan. And sometimes it's hard to fill that void, and you will do your best to care for each other. But I find it comforting, as Mom and great-grandma did, to know the Lord does that for her. So friends, normally I would end this with a prayer, but I don't want to do that. I want to bless you on behalf of Mom, your grandma, and your great-grandma. May you know great love and great laughter. May you celebrate with your children's children's children. May you know how to play with kids and slip and slides in the backyards. And always have a drawer and a room with stuff for them to play with. May you laugh well together. May you cry well together. May you cheer one another on those difficult days. And may you know the love of your life. And know that you are cherished and loved by your family and one another. But Lord, we give you Shirley. She is your child. And as much as it pains us, we give her back to you. But we bless her and we bless her family. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. Friends, thank you. It's been a great privilege. The Lord bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You guys did great.
Thank you
No,
very much.
it's
That was
hard.
beautiful.
I know it's hard, Shirley, or Anita to get up and share, but you did so well. And Peter, thank you.